Now, when you guys landed in that tall grass, what did you guys have to watch out for besides trying to figure out where to put your feet and where your landing would be? There was something else that you had to watch out for.
First of all, we had to figure out which way we were going to head. After we finally landed on hard ground, our visibility was next to nothing because this grass was 8, 9 feet tall sometimes.
Mm.
So that's what we had to do. We had to make sure we kept contact visually or otherwise. Well, it would only be visually with the other guys that we were with on the helicopter drop. And then we had to determine our lieutenant was, or our captain, and what direction we were going to head after we hit the ground. We didn't know that right away. Never really knew. It was up to our leader to direct us, and after that, what direction he's going to head to get, into more cover and get into areas that's got more jungle cover, so we can set up and figure out which direction we should go to look for the enemy. So,
Yeah. And you
all
had to
part.
watch out for snakes, right? When you were
Well,
landing in that shelter.
yeah, sometimes you had to watch out. Yeah, always you did, but that honestly didn't. It wasn't a big problem there. I don't know why, but I did not see that many snakes when I was over there.
Now, you mentioned rucksacks, and uh, please tell us what rucksacks were and what you used them for.
Okay, that's what we carried all our equipment when we go out in our patrols, and that's sometimes we would be returning to the fire base, so we didn't have to carry our full rucksack. But otherwise, if we were leaving or permanently going out into the bush, where we would be staying overnight on several, 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, we'd have to have everything in that rucksack that we needed. Food. It was mostly our sea rations, our food, our ponchos. We had ponchos that we slept on. We might have an air mattress that we'd sleep on if we had an air mattress, which we often didn't have. Oftentimes we just slept on the ground.
Mhm.
But anything like that we and we'd also carry. That was where our ammunition was. We carried the ammunition for our M16s and the cartridges in our rucksacks. So that was, and like I said, they often got up to what they told me was 40 or 50 pounds we'd carry, and we'd have it strapped around us with everything on the back. That was what it was.
Yes.
And then we also carried rounds for the M60 machine gun, which that when they start firing that M60 machine gun, they go through bullets really fast. So that we had to have everybody carrying M60 bullets, or we were strapping bullet rounds around us too for the M60 machine gun, because you couldn't just have the M60 machine gunner carrying the bullets, because you had to have a lot more of those big bullets in case we got into a fight where he'd have to fire that machine gun. Everybody carried several straps of those M60 machine gun bullets. And then we had the canteen strapped to us, water and stuff like that.
Right. Now, you did mention the impact of the landing, and you talked about some of the guys, when they landed, they would sprain their ankles. Did that ever happen to you?
Uh, no, just not a. I did have a light sprain, but not that I was immobilized. But there were several guys that got immobilized from the fall, from the jump from the helicopter. Yeah, so that wasn't good. It
No.
never happened to me where I couldn't continue. It was really sore at times but it wasn't anything that stopped me from walking or getting through the jungle.
That's good. That's good. Now, when you all did get to your assigned areas in the jungle, did you get a little more training when you were there, or did you guys I imagine you would probably just kind of get together and talk about what you could do in that situation, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we didn't. When you're out there like that, you didn't get any more training. You just had to figure out how you'd set up your night station. Where you're going to have this, where you're going to sleep, and uh, what direction you should be looking at. What was the most dangerous direction or most likely attack position that the enemy would come from, So you'd reinforce that. And we'd usually form a perimeter. Usually it was a rough circle of each of these posts, the tents we slept in. And there'd be three or four of us in each of these positions. So we then have to each have each position, hold night guard, and stay away, at least one person staying awake and operating the radio and every night. And then we'd set up claymore mines and tripwires at night, so you'd be able to hear or see somebody in the dark before they actually could attack us.
Yeah. Now, with your friends that you had, the people that you saw from basic training were Andy and John. When did you come back together and connect when you were out there?
Okay, yes, that was the three of us that we mentioned earlier that were together during the training in the United States, and then got together again and got our orders for our assignments. And Andy was the one that was with me as another squad leader in our same platoon. So he had the same platoon or same area that I was in. He was with me even during that time. And then John got a different, what they call it, they were the 196th Infantry Brigade for the 31st Battalion. So the 196th Brigade had different battalions, like 3 or 4 battalions in it. So it had the 4 of the 31st, 1st of the 46th, and then 1st of the 98th, I think, battalions as part of that brigade. So John got a different assignment with a different battalion than Andy and I. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we separated when we got orders out of Chulai, the headquarters. We left there to go out to the bush. John separated, went a different battalion than Andy and I. So Andy and I stayed together the whole time until Andy got wounded. We can talk about that too, but Andy got wounded there during that time. But and then we didn't see John until we never saw him again after they separated, until I heard he was on LZ Marianne, and that we'll talk about that later too.
Let's talk about the attack you shared with me. You and your squad saw an attack begin in the hills above you all. Please tell us what happened and what you and your unit tried to do.
We had the main attacks we had were in the valley, in Happy Valley. And that was with Viet Cong we found in the rice paddy one day, and we were shooting and firing back and forth rice paddy. And then there's also a time when we came across what they call the jungle jail, where they had the bunch of Viet Cong, or the enemy had a setup where they had captured these South Vietnamese army guys that were in the South Viet, and had them tied down in beds, wooden beds up in the jungle. They were prisoners of war. That's what it was. We found out they had this up in this mountain, so we had orders, and we've got to take over this prisoner of war camp and see how many of the enemy and how many friendly guys are being held there by the enemy.
So what did these jungle prisons look like?
So these were just areas that they had captured and kept and questioned South Vietnamese army guys for intelligence, and had them under lock and key, you might say. But they actually had bamboo beds up there in the jungle, and they had them locked down from the feet. They actually had holes in the foot of the beds for their feet to come through, and they had an upper section that was hinged and would come down, and they'd lock their end of their legs and their feet in these floor and the beds, the foot of the beds, right? in the foot of the bed. So that's how they kept them in these beds. And then either they tortured them and questioned them as far as intelligence before they either killed them or whatever they did to those poor guys.
Yeah.
So there was nothing special there. There was no other. It was just they set up in the jungle and had these structures that they held the South Vietnamese in and kept them there where they couldn't get away. And we saw that one day. We saw a couple guys walking along the river, and we stopped them. And military-age men, we didn't know who they were. But then we took them away in our helicopters and questioned them through our intelligence people, and they found out that they had been in that camp and escaped. And they said they're more of their comrades, our friendly South Vietnamese soldiers were still up there in these prison camps, so that we could go up there and try to free them. That's what we did.
That's what you did. Now, could you please share with us what happened to your friend John C. Calhoun and the miracle he experienced?
Well, let's see. One night we were on a fire base, and I want to say, I think it was Firebase West. And we were in our bunkers pulling guard. And it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. We started hearing these explosions and gunshots and artillery going off, bombs going off in the distant dark. And of course, we were at the top of the hill, so we had a real good view of miles and miles out into the jungle. And we didn't know it at the time, but there was a fire base called Marianne out there. That's where John C. Calhoun was at the time. I didn't know that either, but we just knew something was up. And then we started listening to the radio. Their radio, they were being invaded by the enemy at 3 o'clock in the morning, overrun, what they call overrun, at the top of the hill, their fire base. And it was an attack that was totally a surprise. They didn't see it coming. Our guys didn't see it coming. And our guys were, of course, where they're supposed to be. They were in their bunkers, either sleeping or pulling guard. But a lot of them had partied that night, and they were celebrating because they had recently taken out a lot of the enemy in the jungle. So they came back and relaxed and celebrated that they had been very victorious the week before or the days before. And they weren't really totally alert, and evidently had intelligence that there was no apparent enemy activity anywhere near their fire base. That was the other reason they let their guard down a little bit. And actually, a book was written about it. And that's how I learned that John C. Calhoun was part of this. I did not know that at the time. And they called us, told us at 3 in the morning, 3:30, it was still going on, fighting. They said they're trying to get helicopters out to us to take all of our guys, our company, to help defend that Firebase Marianne. But the helicopters were so far away that by the time they got halfway to pick us up, the invasion was already over and the damage was already done at Firebase Marianne. And they ended up killing, and they call them ZAPPERS, SAPPERS. And the book is Zappers in the Wire. It's the title of the book. What happened was these Viet Cong would come, and all they had were their underwear. They were all bare except for a pair of underwear, and then they had explosives attached to their body, what they call satchels, and these things were strapped with explosives. So they go by each bunker and set the satchel and throw it in, and they blow up the bunker, and they blow up the guys that were in the bunker.
Wow.
And that's how they were going right through the fire base and shooting them up. They also had a weapon, their rifle. So they go through and shoot up the guys pulling the guard. The guy on the guard at the bunker usually was sitting right outside. So he'd get shot, and then they'd go and just throw the satchel and kill the other guys that are in the bunkers and go to the next bunker and go right around the perimeter and kill everybody.
Wow.
And they ended up going toward the command center and killing a few of the upper, where or trying to wound. They ended up wounding him, not killing him, I think, at that time. Anyway, it's recorded in the book. But somehow I got wind that I didn't know it at the time. And it was just somebody else. We just knew it was first of the 46, the Americal. It was on Firebase Marianne. And I thought, oh, yeah, where's John C. Calhoun got? You know, I think he got assigned to that battalion.
Oh, no.
I didn't know it till someone said, well, they wrote a book about that. You should read the book. I said, okay. I went and read the book, and there it talks about Sergeant John C. Calhoun and what he went through.
And how long after you got home did you find out about that book?
That's a good question. Very short time. Yeah, a very short time. Probably like a month or something like that. And I found the book or ordered it, however I got it. I read it and found his name in there, that he was part of that. And supposedly a survivor, one of the few, there weren't a lot of survivors, but he was one of them.
Wow.
And he was from a small town in South Carolina. And I thought, well, that's the guy, because at NCO school, on the weekends, we'd get a pass. And we could go and go have fun on the weekends, as long as we come back on Sunday and come back to Fort Benning. So John C. Calhoun had a family in South Carolina, so he'd drive back to South Carolina to spend the weekend with his family. And he dropped Andy and I, my friend Andy I mentioned before, and I and maybe one other guy in Atlanta, and we'd party and get into trouble in Atlanta over the weekend. And come Sunday, here comes John C. Calhoun, and we'd have a meeting point. He'd pick us up, and we'd all drive back to Fort Benning on Sunday night and start over, our week at Fort Benning. So anyway, he was I knew that had to be him. So I decided, hey, I'm going to try to find John C. Calhoun. Right. This is probably now a couple of months. I wish I would have maybe kept a diary or something. I'm not good on dates, and it's hard to remember. But it's probably about 2 or 3 months. I decided to take a trip up there to see if I could find him. And I went out of Greenville, South Carolina. I drove down these country roads. It was like going back in time, and it got more rural and less houses. Finally, I get to, I think it was called Ware Shoals or something, Alabama. Ware Shoals, Alabama. Ware Shoals, South Carolina. Anyway, a little town out there in the middle of nowhere. Point being, I tried this one house, went up the front door, knocked on the front door, rang the doorbell, and this lady came to the door and looked at me, and she said, yes, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I'm looking for an old friend of mine, John C. Calhoun. She said, well, I'm Mrs. Calhoun, and my husband is John. So,
Maybe
was
you're in
cool.
the right place.
Yeah. And she was about, our age, she was about 60 or whatever, the age I was at the time. And said, well, okay. And John's, yeah, he's still around. He's here. He's in town right now. And who are you? She gets on the phone. Well, I can call him and see if he remembers you or if he can come and see you. Oh, she said, I got this guy, Chuck Cape is here. He says he served with you in Vietnam. And what's that? Okay, I'll tell him. Well, just give him about, an hour. He'll be here if you don't mind waiting for him. Like I'm gonna, oh no, I said, I don't mind. I got time. I came up here to see him.
That's awesome.
So here he comes. And we had a great meeting, and we sat down and went over everything, told him about, I read a book about what happened to him, and how he survived. And he showed me, and he had been shot 5 times in this attack and lived to tell about it. Not one round hit a vital organ. But he said, and then he was medevaced out of there with 5 gunshot wounds in his body, right? And how he ever didn't bleed to death and lived through taking, a helicopter ride to the hospital and how much time that took. So I call him my miracle man. And, without going into a lot of detail, but basically that's what happened. He was in the bunker at the time and got shot, and the VC, the Viet Cong, kept going, thinking he was a dead man. And then they ended up going to the end of the fire base and coming back to re-attack these bunkers to make sure that they had taken out everybody they could that was still in the bunker. And he ended up putting his radio man's body over his body in the bunker because he could hear him coming back. And he pretended like he was dead along with his radio man. And they came in and shot up his radio man. And again, the bullets into the radio man's body and smashed his face in and right there in front of him. And it was a miracle that he didn't get shot and killed there. But that's what he did. He survived there, and it was quite an experience for him. So
yeah. That is amazing. That must have been harrowing to have to put the radio man on top of him and just be there. And I'm sure he was saying his prayers too at that time.
And to witness him getting, his radio man getting it smashed his face up and smashed his head, and I'm sure John got hit knocked in a few times too, but of course he pretended like he was already dead anyway, so they no sense shooting him again. So
yes,
they moved on, and he's lived to tell about it somehow.
That's amazing.
And
you also shared with me that Andy was injured later and also received a miracle. Could you briefly share with us what happened to him?
Yes. Andy, one night, as we all did, we're out in our perimeters, all set up. And every night, if we were setting up, we would go out and each one of us would be in a certain, one position. There'd be 3 or 4 of us, or a couple of us at each position in the perimeter around our night camp. Well, he had one across from me. He was on the other side. And we do is we set up before dark, just before dark, we'd go out and set up our tripwire in front of our position. And then we'd set up what they call the claymore mines. And those would be the explosives that if they trip the tripwire, that would ignite and blow up these claymores, would shoot all kinds of BB-like pieces from the claymore and spray out and take out the enemy that tripped the tripwire ahead of them, Well, the claymore was set up, it was kind of an angular rectangle. So it only exploded in one direction. And we'd make sure we set up that the direction of explosive would go out away from our perimeter, and then toward the tripwire. So then nothing really happened that night to indicate we were, or that there was any enemy near us or coming in near us at night. But I did learn later that the guys next door to Andy's position fell asleep and for the night and did not pull guard duty at their position. And of course, it's pitch dark out there. It's, you're just going by sound, making sure you don't hear anything. But they didn't know that at the time. So Andy went out like we normally do, and he had set up his tripwire and his claymore that night. So in the morning, you had to go up first. As soon as the sun came up in the morning, the daylight, you'd go out and take down your claymore and your tripwire. Thing everybody hears is this big explosion by Andy's site, and it turns out the Viet Cong had snuck up during the night and reversed the claymore to explode toward our perimeter. So when Andy went out there, he tripped the tripwire that they had and exploded the claymore, and all of that blew into Andy and mostly into his legs. And we had to take him and do some quick emergency medical care.
I'm getting a little love here from my dog. So please go back to Andy. I'm sorry.
And I don't know well, I don't know how much detail I should say, but basically, Andy was, we pulled it, got the medic right away, of course, and tried to stop the bleeding on his leg and what was left of his legs. And it was awful.
Yes.
Anyway, fortunately, we called a medevac in, and the helicopters came very quickly, which is a blessing. Whoops,
Mhm.
lost you.
Absolutely. Now, when that medevac came in, as a pilot was transporting Andy away, what happened?
Right. We left. He took Andy on the Huey helicopter back toward the hospital, and as he left our ridge, he had to fly over a valley and then the mountain side where the BC often sat. So as he's flying over the other side of the mountain, you hear this clack clack noise, and there had shot through the bottom of the helicopter. The BC shot the pilot in the leg, and the pilot fortunately had a co-pilot. There were two of them, and we heard this on their radio. We were tuned into the radio and said that I'm shot, I'm shot, I'm shot. And as I got the co-pilot's got to take over for me. He took over, and they kept on going. And somehow he managed to get past that enemy fire and keep on going to take Andy back to the hospital. And I thought, wow. And after all that, I learned that Andy went through all kinds of different hospitals to get back through Japan and back to the United States. And again, somehow survived. I don't know how he could survive without just bleeding to death because of what I saw. And I, saw his leg and what was left or not left of it, and his other parts of his lower body. And it's just amazing to me. Just another miracle of God, really.
Yeah.
And it's he ended up at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and there's and the other thing was he had a couple of incidents where gangrene, started, and almost killed him or took his life. They ended up treating the gangrene, so he ended up only losing one leg and kept his other leg, and kept his life, survived, and that was amazing. So
Yes.
I then ended up. He lived in Ohio, and ended up, of course, I tried to communicate with him in the hospital when he was there by letter, or tried to keep in touch with him, and then finally we did get together in person again and met each other and renewed old times and what had really happened to him after he got medevac out of there, what happened, what I went through after he left, and that kind of thing.
Yes. Did Andy, the pilot, co-pilot, and medic make it safely to the hospital?
Yes.
Good.
No one lost their life there, and it was quite a ways, but they somehow did it. They made it okay. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And of course that was bad too, because the military and the army isn't real good at communicating those kind of things back to you. Everybody wanted to know, did Andy live through it? Is he okay? It took forever to get any kind of message back that told us, he made it, and he's in the hospital structure now with the army and getting treated and that kind of thing. So that was really hard to take. It really disappointed me that they didn't keep us well informed. Everyone wanted to know if he's okay and he survived. We could stay in touch with him, So yeah.
That must have been difficult. I mean, you had to guess, you didn't know, and you had to wait till you got home. And even within, like, the ability to try to find some of your friends if you didn't know where they lived, that was even more difficult than what it could be now,
He was from Lorain, Ohio. Yes. Like I
Now,
said, I ended up at Valley Forge, and somehow that's when I started communicating. But that was long months after I got out of the service. I was communicating with him. He was still in military hospitals and being treated. It was just something. And he ended up You know, he ended up having one artificial leg, and he went out golfing and did things that just great story, great story that he ended up doing. And he was married at the time. We got together then later too and reminisced on all of that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, there's another veteran I'll be interviewing soon, and he had that ability to tell me of the airplane hospitals that when they were moving them, something like what Andy would be in as he was being moved and medevaced from one place to another, that they would have like the ability to help them on those planes as they're being transported from hospital to hospital.
Oh yeah.
How do you know how many hospitals he had to go to?
No.
Did you ever get?
I'd just be guessing. I want to know it's multiple ones, so I don't know. Really don't.
Okay. Did you ever get injured while you were in Vietnam?
No, never did.
You're blessed. You were the one that didn't get hurt. That's a blessing.
Yes. Yep.
Is there any?
Especially with my two other guys that I was so close to. They both had such horrible experiences, you know, and I didn't go through any of that. That's why I tell people with John C. Calhoun got orders for that first of the 46. Andy and I could have been there too. We could have got orders for first of 46. For some reason, he got that one of the first, and we got fourth of the 31st. So we were not part of LZ Marianne and that invasion and that, you know, overrunning the fire base, LZ Marianne. But now that's a battle that when I look at these Vietnam books, there's hardly any coverage of that battle that I can ever read about. It's like, it's just strange how that happened because that was a major, you know, invasion or takeover. I guess because it's just one fire base out in the middle of the jungle, that wasn't a big battle. You know, like the famous ones that are written up in these Vietnam books. So anyway.
Well, and you know, when I was starting to think about doing this was a project that God laid on my heart to start doing. And I thought, where would I go? Who's archiving these stories? You know, and I thought about the Library of Congress because as a kid, when you're in school and there's certain things that you have to look for that are like for research projects and stuff, it had the Library of Congress. You know, you could find this through them. So I thought about it, and that's when I saw the Veterans History Project. And as I go along and hear all these stories, it's exactly what goes through my mind. We don't have these in the history books, and that's the whole mission of this project that I'm working on here. This is the mission, is to be able to try to get as many stories before you guys are gone.
Yeah.
You know, and I think about, because on the Library of Congress sheet, you know, where you have to put which war you're in. It even goes back to where it says World War I. And I think, wow, you know, what would have been like to be able to hear some of their stories as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
We have two. Did I tell you this? We get together for lunch with our group of guys, and we've got now a guy that comes often is 104 years old.
Really?
Yes, another guy that's 100 years old from World War II.
I would love to be able to interview them, because the few that I have here that I've been doing the last 2 to 3 have been Vietnam ones, and it's been going through my brain. I've got to get back to the World War II ones as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can look it up. I think I've got a listing, and I could get you the name and the contact numbers. I can do that for you if you want me to do that.
I would absolutely love to, and I'm gonna.
And they're both pretty sharp mentally too, by the way. That's quite amazing. And one served in. This is good, diversified. Because one served in Europe, and one served in the South Pacific. So,
and those are questions that with the World War II vets, because I use some of the Library of Congress's questions, but like, as you can see, a lot of this is stuff that you told me, these questions, but that is one that they ask is what what theater did you serve in. So
Right.
you have Europe and you have Asia, and so you have that for that.
And those were two totally different theaters that they served in, right? I mean,
Yes.
totally different different war, because yeah, and they both made the one that was in the South Pacific told us that they were shot down, and he was alive when they got shot down in the jungles of Manila, and they had to walk around Manila, not Manila, Philippines, the jungle of the Philippines, where the Japanese had control of the Philippines at the time he landed or was shot down there. So he was running around the jungle trying to avoid the Japanese after he got shot down, and
Wow.
he ended up finding his friendlies. Somehow found the friendlies there in the jungle of the Philippines and came back. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
those guys don't realize the story they have to tell, and if they haven't done it, oh, they should. Yeah, that'd
Yes.
be great if you could do their story. Anyway.
Yes. So if you happen to have those contacts, and they can always look on the website. I mean, I want to talk to them personally, but for them to trust and see what I'm doing, the YouTube channel, they can check. There's a few World War II vets on there.
Okay.
And so they can see that, but I would love to. Yes. Were there any other incidents that you could remember that stood out to you about your time in Vietnam?
Well, there was one very, very important one that was quite shocking, actually, and uh, really opened our eyes to the dangers involved in just walking through the jungle like we did almost every day on patrol. We were out on patrol, and I had my squad with me, and all of a sudden, my point man, the man first in line, said, "Everybody down!" And he yelled, and everybody got down and waited for an explosion. And we thought, "Uh-oh," or someone's going to start shooting at us. Neither happened. It was all quiet. And a little while later, my point man came back. His name was Gilbert Meyer, and he said, "Sarge," says, "I just tripped a tripwire that was across the trail." And he said, I knew that was going to be a bad thing, but I didn't know what was going to happen next. I said, "Well, good. I'm glad it's quiet so far." So anyway, we've got to check that out though, Gilbert. So I don't know if you're not probably in a position to do that, because excuse me, he was kind of pale at the time. He had lost a little of his color in his face.
I bet.
And yeah, he thought his life was leaving him and all the rest of us. So anyway, I had another guy. I went up with another guy to check out the tripwire, and then we said, "Well, we got to see what this is all about. This is going to be fun. Let me report it first." And we of course, they said, "You got to follow that tripwire, Sergeant Cape, and see what it goes to." And okay, so we walked through. Excuse me, the jungle, and I don't know, 60 or 80 feet away, something like that, I see this object in the jungle all behind the brush. It obviously didn't look like it belonged there. And we take a few more steps, and of course we were concerned that the Viet Cong had also booby trapped along the way, and whatever was there was going to be booby trapped too. So we had to be very careful that there wasn't another mine or explosion waiting for us. So anyway, we started clearing away the brush, and we see this huge bomb, like a cylinder or a torpedo shaped thing that was sitting there all ready to blow up, it looked like, and that's where the tripwire was headed to. And I then called back to headquarters and told them what I found and what kind of size of we're looking at here. And they said, "Well, you can't leave it there." And I said, "Yeah, I know." So then we decided to take out what we call our C4. That's our explosive. It looks like clay, and you attach that to whatever you want to blow up, and then you run a wire back to an igniter that once you click that igniter, it sends the voltage through there, and it blows up whatever it's attached to. So that's what we did. We backed up and set that all up, and then we got ourselves back a good 100 feet, maybe more, around that whole area. So we didn't know how much or how far this bomb was going to explode and take out the part of the jungle that's sitting around it. But anyway, we set the igniter and off it went. And sure enough, there was this gigantic explosion, and shrubbery and trees were derooted. A couple of trees came right out of the ground next to it, and flying through the air and dropping down near us. But all of us were far enough away that it didn't come and actually cause any damage. But obviously, all kinds of metal and shrapnel from the bomb, from the the unexploded bomb, and we figured out it was. It had to have been dropped from one of our B-52 bombers that were dropping bombs on a regular basis at that time. And it never went off when it hit the ground. And that's what the whole thing was all about. So
Wow.
it was quite a deal. But the whole thing came back to the wire. And the wire evidently had been there so long, that tripwire, in that humid, hot environment, and it was generally 100+ degrees almost every day out there. And very humid. We had a lot of rain and monsoons, and that was what God saved us for, because it broke the actual tripwire between the trail and the bomb. It tore it, and it was too weak. The wire was too weak to go all the way back and set off the bomb. So that's what saved us. And we said, thank God, and thank God. Oh, we're all very thankful that we still had all our body parts, and nobody got injured. And that was the biggest miracle that happened to me. There were several other miracles that happened in smaller doses over there, but that's how we got through it. And I was able to get, I'm proud of this. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but my whole squad came back uninjured, and no one in my squad lost their life for the year we were over there. So
that's awesome.
I'm very proud of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That must have been very scary for your point man first and foremost. And then for all of you all going back there how many of you guys went back there to check on that?
About 3 of us. Two guys and myself, and the rest of them stayed on the trail. And then we had to figure out, of course, then I took Gilbert Meyer off being point. I didn't figure he would be up for walking any more point that day. So I got another guy to go ahead and be my point man. So I wasn't, as a sergeant squad leader, you're not supposed to. I'm not supposed to be the point man. But sometimes some of these squad leaders did that, and I didn't believe in that. I thought, no, I'm not. I'm should be the most important person, the leader of the squad. So I should not be up at point, because that's where you get ambushed, or that's where you trip the tripwires, or step on the punji pit, those pits that they used to have with the sharpened bamboo, underneath, where you step on that, and all those booby traps might hit you first. So
right.
one of the worst things was ambushes, and we never got in a real bad ambush either, which is a miracle. That's one of my other miracles. A lot of the guys that spent a year in combat did get ambushed by the enemy, and that's not good,
It's interesting to me, and I think it's really cool that you think about these things, that these are miracles, and that you took a moment to think about, my group was never ambushed.
Yeah.
And that's gratitude right there, that's awesome. And you said the bomb was huge, right?
Yes, it was. It was one of the biggest, I think, that the B-52 dropped. It was, like a good 10 feet. I would say 10 feet, roughly 10 feet long, something like that. And I'm guessing about 400, 500 pounds, somewhere in that area, but that's a guess. I looked at some of the armament that the B-52 carries, and that was a big bubba. So that would have done a lot of damage. Would have probably taken out my whole squad had it blown up, I would think. So
Wow. I imagine so. It's amazing. It's amazing to think about. Yes. And you're not the only one that talked about where you didn't think you should be the first, the point man. When you said that, I was thinking about one of the other interviews that I did, and he was sharing his father's story because his father had passed, and his father had put him, he was the leader in his squad as well, and
Excuse me.
and he had a lot of experience doing this.
Yeah.
And he was the third in the group, so
Yeah.
so he was positioned in third place, so he knew where he needed to be positioned at.
Yeah.
And in fact, one part of the interview, he had said that his father had taken his jacket off and turned it inside out, and the people he was serving with, because they had to go right in the battle, he was showing up there to train them, but then they had to go right in battle, and so he took his jacket off, turned it inside out, and the soldiers asked him why he was doing that, and he said, because with the bars I have on my jacket, they're going to see that and they're going to try to target me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was for the officers, yeah, that had the one single or double silver bars and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. Now,
Excuse me.
Now this question, that is not a part of your military career, but it's something that you said that I guess it was before you went in the military, that you used to go to a ball field and watch the baseball games. Was that before your military experience?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We were younger, much younger then. Yeah.
How old were you when you would go to the baseball fields and watch the games?
Well, this was back in our preteen years, really almost preteen. I lived in Racine, Wisconsin, and we had the North Shore train that traveled from Racine to Kenosha to Milwaukee. And we went to Milwaukee to the Milwaukee Braves games on that train. 3 or 4 of us would go on this train, and usually we'd go to a Sunday doubleheader where we'd have 2 games we could go and watch at Milwaukee County Stadium, where the Milwaukee Braves played. Okay, professional team, right? And this is back in the 1957, 58. So I would have been around 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there, 10 years old. And I had a couple, and for whatever reason, our parents let us go.
Wow.
What we'd do is, Kathy, we'd usually bring a luncheon with us and bring our gloves. So we would go to get there early at the county stadium, and they'd have batting practice. We'd try to catch a ball that they hit out to us and stuff. But we'd always pack a lunch. And I remember packing, like, it was usually hot dogs, and we'd wrap them up in tinfoil to keep them warm the whole time we're taking the train trip and getting to the stadium, because we usually would get hungry enough or want to eat those until we got to the ballpark. And that was quite an experience. It really was. But that's what that was. And I think I mentioned that after the game, we discovered or found out where the players actually parked their cars after the ball game, and they'd be coming out after they take their shower and thing. We'd stand out there waiting for them, and a bunch of us kids would be out there. Not a lot of the guys knew what we knew. Many of the kids knew what we knew. So I think I told you once that what we try to do is get their autograph, and then we'd ask them if they could take us back to the train station, which is in downtown Milwaukee. That was about a half-hour drive from the Milwaukee County Stadium. So we could get back to the train station to return back to Racine on the North Shore train. So the one time we got Henry Aaron got his ear as he was walking to his car, and he said, well, I'm gonna see if I can take you guys back there. He opened his car and he looked around, and all of a sudden a bunch of kids behind us that weren't part of our group said, hey, Hank Aaron's gonna take us in his car.
Wow.
And he looks around and he said, oh no, oh, that's it. That was the end of that idea. So that was a bummer.
Oh
But I did,
man.
yeah, that would have been neat, hey? And those kids really ruined it for all of us. So,
Oh, no.
but we had another opportunity, and another famous Brave called Warren Spahn, a great pitcher, Hall of Famer, one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball. He gave us a ride one time in his, I think it was a station wagon, and there weren't the kids around at that time. So we got in there, and there were like four of us, and he drove us to the North Shore station in Milwaukee and dropped us off and thanked us. And I think we got his autograph, but through the years, I don't know what happened to that autograph. I don't have that to this day, and I regret that. But that was that was cool. So anyway, that's how that all went about. So
That's awesome, because that would have been a good addition to your baseball collection that you have.
yeah, right, yeah, right, yeah.
What do you think is the biggest, the coolest part of your collection that you have?
I have a big picture there, frame picture, that's a benefit game with way back in the early 1900s. Well, not early 1900s, but 1920s, 30s, and it lists all these. It was like a big all-star game that invited and got all these famous players to play on this benefit game for another Hall of Famer that had some bad luck and had some tragedies in his marriage and things. And they had this special benefit game for them, and they're all standing there. Like 20, over 20 of them are standing there, and they're identified on the picture. And I think I figured out there were like 8 or 9 of them ended up in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Ty Cobb, these kind of names that are famous were all pictured in that. And I got that at an antique store one time, and it's amazing what I picked up in an antique stores with this baseball collection I've got. And for the kind of prices that you wouldn't, I don't think a lot of these antique stores know exactly what they're selling or how valuable it is. Like a picture of Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth or these guys, and then if you happen to get one with an autograph, of course, it's could be $1,000 or better or whatever. But this one was really good because it listed all of the main big players at the time. So that's probably that's one of my best ones. I've got a couple of Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio with their autographs and one picture. So that's worth a lot of money. That's something my kids gave me for my birthday one time. My one son in the roofing business went to this guy's house, and he saw all these baseball pictures in his house and framed in his house. And he says, "Oh, you really a collector, aren't you?" And he knew that I had started a man cave with these pictures. And he said something about, maybe we can offset a little bit of what I'm going to charge you for the roof. I can pick up a couple pictures for my dad. So that's what he did. And that was like, when you get Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio together with their autographs, and then it's authenticated, it has to be authenticated and certified, of course, as true. And,
right.
And then it's worth a lot of money. So those
right.
those are one of my best ones that I've had in the collection there. So.
Right. Well, that is a very cool story. And, I've enjoyed listening to this part of your story, but also your service time.